building on what many of the questions I've had have been answered, but it really boils down to whether you have thoughts on what the city can do to combat money laundering in our real estate sector as opposed to the provinces and the feds. And you've directed us to look at what Richmond has done as an epicenter. Certainly Vancouver and I'd say West Vancouver have also had a disproportionate amount of effect of this. I'm interested to understand how much you think that this has had an effect on the assessed value of property, because my take on it, especially since 2016, and I think this had started to ramp up in 2015 per your views. Do you think, how much do you think this has had an impact on the assessed values of properties in this area?
Thank you, Councillor. So two quick things. I mean, the more I think about it, just being here and talking with you, one, I think it's great that you're taking this initiative to discuss this issue. I think likewise, it's good that Richmond was doing what it's doing. In terms of what can council do, I think my earlier response, why not look at it, with a working group, working committee of some sort, a staff group, possibly consultants, whatever it takes, to take a look at your various operations and see what your vulnerabilities are. It really is an area that has not been touched, to my knowledge, by any reports, certainly not here and probably not in Canada. So, and that doesn't necessarily have to be an elaborate process, but certainly something that one could look at. Sorry, the second part was...
The assessed value.
Yeah, the assessed value. Sorry. We do know from our work that, and I think you all know that, that if you have a house, if you only have one house sale on your street, that tends to impact on everybody on the street. That's the way our assessments work. So if you do have these clusters, and we were seeing these clusters of sales that hit some of these red flags and typologies, then definitely assessed values in that area are going to be impacted. And that's pretty clear. We say that in our report, so does Professor Maloney. In terms of the actual amount, I don't know, because again, we didn't try to quantify it, but I think you'd find it sporadic depending on where you are, in what area, and because some, let's say, not just in Vancouver, but in other communities, such as Richmond, there are certain areas of the community that were impacted by large sales, overseas sales, money coming in. And so typically those areas will be impacted in terms of their assessments. Everybody will be impacted down the road, downstream.
Indeed, and downstream, of course, as those assessments went over $3 million, the provincial government slapped a school tax on them. So there are other implications, of course, other than just the direct increases. And this also would go for the safe deposit boxes in the sky, as we refer to them, as we're seeing more and more money downloaded into those buildings. I was interested in picking up on what Councillor Dominato was talking about, the port. Did we, in fact, have separate port police originally? And why did we get rid of them? And should we be looking at bringing them back?
Yeah, I don't recall all the details. I was in the RCMP at the time. There used to be the National Harbours Board Police, which became the Ports Canada Police, and then that department was dissolved by the federal government. It was a totally federal department that was dissolved, and the responsibility was turned over to municipal police. I don't recall if there was any financial arrangement at that time, but it's all documented, and that goes back probably 20 years now.
20 years isn't that long.
That'd be about right? Yeah, about that.
Maybe worth a revisit then. And then finally, I was part of a group, and a shout out to Vancouver Not Vegas years ago, that tried to prevent casinos coming into the city of Vancouver. We saw it at the time as wolves in sheep's clothing coming in, and I'm afraid that some of our fears have been realized. Do you see the continuing presence and dependence on the money coming out of casinos as being antithetical to sorting out this problem?
No, I don't actually, Councillor. I actually got a lot of support from the casino operators in my doing the report. What you got to understand here is it's actually BCLC that runs our casinos. The casino operators are actually contracted to BCLC, and they are tightly controlled by the Lottery Corporation. So to the point that I recommended a different model, going to a risk-based model or as opposed to a prescriptive model. They're obviously there to turn a profit, but so is BCLC for the province. The casino industry, by all intents, is a legitimate industry. It does, a lot of people enjoy the entertainment provided by the casino industry, and it does produce a lot of revenue. I don't think that, if you're asking my personal opinion, that in and of itself is the problem. The problem tends to be, where is the money coming from? And that's why I go back again to the issue of source of funds. The minister, Minister Eby, has indicated that and BCLC has said there's been quite a noticeable drop-off in suspicious transactions since 2016 or so, when the light was shone on casinos. My sense is that if the recommendations are implemented, the casinos should operate the way they do in Vegas and in Ontario, which is within the law predominantly. You will not get rid of organized crime entirely, you never will, but predominantly they will be within the law. If you choose not to implement the recommendations, if that doesn't happen, organized crime will be back. It's just a matter of when.
Thank you very much.